Thank you for joining us today. Can you tell us a bit about yourself and what brought you here to share your story? Of course. My name is John Anderson. I'm 42 years old, and I work as a social worker in Chicago helping at-risk youth. But 20 years ago, I was a very different person. I was a college student at the University of Illinois, more interested in partying than studying. That all changed one night in 1994 when I had an experience that completely transformed my life. What happened that night? It was a typical Friday night. My friends and I were bar hopping along Green Street, which was the main strip near campus. I had already had quite a few drinks and was pretty intoxicated. At some point, I started feeling overheated and stepped outside for some air. When I went back in, I couldn't find my friends anywhere. I later found out they had moved on to the next bar without me. After searching for a while, I decided to head back to my dorm. It was about a 20-minute walk, but in my drunken state, it felt much longer. I was staggering along University Avenue when I started feeling really dizzy and nauseous. I spotted a bus stop bench and thought I'd sit down for a minute to catch my breath. And then what happened? The next thing I knew, I was looking down at my own body lying motionless on that bench. It was the strangest sensation. I felt completely sober and clear-headed, but I was somehow floating above myself. I could see my body sprawled out on the bench, but I felt no connection to it anymore. It was like looking at a stranger. That must have been terrifying. How did you react? Surprisingly, I wasn't scared at all. I felt this incredible sense of freedom and lightness. All the heaviness of my physical body was gone. I could see in all directions at once, even behind me, without turning, and I could zoom in on things far away, as if they were right next to me. It was exhilarating. Then I noticed this tunnel of light hovering about 15 feet above me. Somehow I just knew I was supposed to go into it. So without even thinking about it, I started floating up towards the entrance. Can you describe what it was like inside the tunnel? At first, I was just gently drifting through it. But then I started picking up speed. Soon I was hurtling through space faster than I thought possible. I could see stars and galaxies whizzing by. It felt like I was traversing the entire universe in a matter of moments. The whole time, I was enveloped in this indescribable feeling of peace and love. It was like being embraced by pure joy and acceptance. All my worries and fears from life on Earth just melted away. How long did this journey through the tunnel last? It's hard to say. Time didn't seem to exist there in the same way it does here. It could have been seconds or centuries. I honestly couldn't tell you. But eventually, I saw this incredibly bright light growing larger as I approached it. As I got closer, the feeling of love intensified beyond anything I could have imagined. It was like being hugged by the entire universe all at once. Every cell in my being was filled with pure bliss and contentment. What happened when you reached the light? As I basked in that overwhelming love, I saw a figure walking towards me out of the light. He was wearing flowing white robes and had this radiant smile. I immediately knew it was Jesus, even though he looked different than any depiction I'd seen before. When he reached me, he started speaking, but his mouth wasn't moving. The words just appeared in my mind. He said, "I've been waiting for you, my child." Wow, that's incredible. What was it like to be in Jesus' presence? It was awe-inspiring, but also surprisingly comfortable. His love and compassion were palpable. I felt completely accepted and at peace. I asked him, "You've been waiting for me?" And he replied, "Yes. You've been chosen to meet me here and now because you've reached a crucial time in your life. Your future will be determined by choices you will soon make." Did he elaborate on what those choices were? He did. He said, "You are at a crossroads. I will show you two possible futures, but in the end, which path you take remains within the boundaries of your own free will to choose." Then he reached out and touched my forehead. Suddenly, I was seeing visions of two different versions of myself about 20 years in the future. Can you describe what you saw in these visions? In the first one, I saw myself in a doctor's office. I looked haggard and sick. The doctor was telling me that my liver was failing due to years of heavy drinking. I could feel the despair and regret radiating from that version of myself. In the second vision, I was about the same age, but I looked much healthier and happier. I was working as a social worker, counseling troubled teens. I could see the positive impact I was having on their lives. There was a sense of purpose and fulfillment that was completely absent in the first vision. That must have been powerful to witness. How did you feel seeing these potential futures? It was eye-opening, to say the least. I realized that the path I was on with my partying lifestyle could lead to serious consequences. But I also saw that I had the potential to do something meaningful with my life, to help others. After the visions faded, I asked Jesus, why me? Lots of people drink. What makes me so special that I'm chosen to see these outcomes? That's a great question. How did Jesus respond? His answer was fascinating. He said, every puzzle contains many pieces that all must fit together in a specific order before the final picture reveals itself. This has always been the case since the beginning. Simply look to the stars and realize all the pieces that had to come together for life to even exist on Earth. If even one were out of place, the entire picture changes. He continued, I cannot say why you are such an important piece, but I do know that you were chosen to be shown this now. Return to Earth and become the piece you were intended to be. That's a profound metaphor. Did you have any other questions for Jesus before returning? I did have one more. I asked him, all my life I've heard that you are coming back. Can you tell me when that will be? Jesus smiled and replied, only my Father knows that answer, my child. Interesting. So what happened next? After that, I turned back towards the tunnel. Before I entered, I took one last look at Jesus. Part of me didn't want to leave. The love and peace I felt there were beyond anything I'd ever experienced. But I knew I had to go back. The return trip through the tunnel was similar to the journey there, but in reverse. As I approached my body on the bench, I slowed down until I was hovering right above it. There was a moment of resistance. My soul didn't want to re-enter that physical form, but then I felt a strong force pulling me back in. What was it like re-entering your body? There was this loud pop sound, and suddenly I was gasping for air, my eyes flying open. I was freezing cold and disoriented, but surprisingly, I didn't feel drunk anymore. It took me a few minutes to get my bearings. I checked my watch and realized only about an hour had passed since I'd left the bar. It felt like I'd been gone for an eternity. I managed to stumble back to my dorm room, my mind reeling from everything I'd experienced. That's an incredible story. How did this experience impact your life moving forward? It completely transformed me. At first, I was in shock, trying to process everything that had happened. I didn't tell anyone for weeks because I was afraid they'd think I was crazy. When I finally worked up the courage to tell my parents and some close friends, the reactions were mixed. My parents were very religious, but they had a hard time believing my experience was real. They thought I might be on drugs or having some kind of mental breakdown. They even tried to get me to see a counselor at our church, who suggested I might have been influenced by Satan. That must have been very difficult to deal with. I felt so alone and misunderstood, but I knew in my heart that what I'd experienced was real. And I couldn't shake the memory of those two potential futures Jesus had shown me. I made the decision to change my life. I stopped drinking and partying. I lost some friends because of it, but I knew it was the right choice. I focused on my studies and my grades improved dramatically. After graduation, I moved to Chicago and pursued a career in social work just like I'd seen in that vision. Now, 20 years later, I'm doing exactly what I saw, helping at-risk youth turn their lives around. It's amazing how closely your life has followed that vision. Do you feel like you understand now why you were chosen to have this experience? I'm still not entirely sure, but I think about what Jesus said about every piece of the puzzle being important. I've worked with hundreds of troubled teens over the years. Maybe one of them will go on to do something world-changing, or maybe the ripple effect of my work will influence thousands of lives in ways I'll never know. I just try to focus on being the best piece I can be, trusting that I'm part of a larger picture that I might not fully understand. That's a beautiful perspective. Has your view on religion or spirituality changed since your experience? Definitely. Before this happened, I was nominally Christian, but not very devout. Now, my faith is the cornerstone of my life. But it's not about dogma or rigid beliefs. It's about trying to embody that unconditional love I felt in the presence of Jesus. I've also become much more open-minded about spirituality in general. I believe there are many paths to the divine, and that love is the common thread that runs through all of them. Have you had any other spiritual experiences since your NDE? Nothing as dramatic as that night, but I do feel a much stronger connection to the spiritual realm now. I've had moments of profound peace during meditation that remind me of what I felt in that light. And sometimes when I'm working with a troubled teen, I'll get these flashes of intuition about exactly what they need to hear. It feels like I'm being guided. That's fascinating. Now, I have to ask, since you had the opportunity to ask Jesus directly about his return, has that changed how you view end times prophecies or the idea of the second coming? It's made me much less concerned with trying to predict when it might happen. So many people get caught up in looking for signs or trying to interpret prophecies. But Jesus himself said that only the Father knows when it will be. I think we're meant to focus on living in the present, spreading love and compassion, rather than worrying about when the end might come. That's a refreshing perspective. Now, I'm curious. Have you ever encountered any skepticism about your experience? Oh, absolutely. Plenty of people have told me it was just a hallucination caused by alcohol poisoning or lack of oxygen to my brain. Some have suggested it was a dream or that I'm making it up for attention. I understand the skepticism. If I hadn't experienced it myself, I might have trouble believing it too. But I know what I saw and felt. It was more real than anything I've experienced in my physical life. I don't try to convince skeptics anymore. I just share my story for those who are open to hearing it. If it brings comfort or inspiration to even one person, then it's worth it. Have you connected with others who have had similar experiences? Yes, and that's been incredibly validating. I've attended support groups for people who've had NDEs, and it's amazing how many common elements there are in our stories: the tunnel, the light, the overwhelming love. But what's even more striking is how these experiences change people's lives. Almost everyone I've met who's had an NDE has gone through a major life transformation afterwards. Many, like me, have shifted into caring professions or dedicating their lives to service. It certainly seems to have had a profound impact on your life's trajectory. Looking back now, how do you feel about that night? I'm incredibly grateful for it. Yes, it was shocking and disorienting at first, and the aftermath of trying to integrate that experience into my life was challenging. But I truly believe it saved me from a self-destructive path and gave my life purpose and meaning. That's not to say my life has been perfect since then. I've still faced challenges and made mistakes, but that experience gave me a broader perspective. It helped me understand that our time here is precious and that our actions have consequences beyond what we can see. That's a powerful takeaway. Now, I'm curious about the work you do with at-risk youth. How has your NDE influenced your approach? It's influenced every aspect of it. Firstly, it's given me an unshakable belief in the potential for change. No matter how troubled a kid might seem, I know they have the capacity for transformation because I experienced it myself. Secondly, it's taught me the importance of showing unconditional love and acceptance. That's what I felt in the presence of Jesus, and I try to embody that in my interactions with these kids. Many of them have never experienced that kind of love before. Lastly, it's given me a sense of the bigger picture. I might not always see the immediate results of my work, but I trust that every positive interaction, every seed of hope I plant, is part of that universal puzzle Jesus talked about. Can you share a specific example of how this approach has made a difference? There was this one kid, Marcus, who came to our program a few years ago. He was 16, already had a long rap sheet, and was on the verge of being sent to juvenile detention. He was angry, defensive, and completely closed off when he first arrived. But I saw something in him, a spark of the divine, you might say. I made it my mission to show him unconditional acceptance, no matter how much he acted out. Slowly, over months, he started to open up. One day, he asked me why I cared so much when everyone else had given up on him. I shared a bit about my NDE and how it taught me that everyone has incredible potential for change. I told him I believed he had that potential too. It was like a light went on in his eyes. From that day on, he was a different person. He started applying himself in school, got involved in community service. Now he's in college, studying to become a counselor himself. That's a beautiful story. It really illustrates the ripple effect one person's transformation can have. Now, I'd like to go back to your NDE for a moment. You mentioned that you could see in all directions at once when you were out of your body. Can you elaborate on that? What was that sensation like? It's one of the hardest things to describe because we don't have any frame of reference for it in our physical lives. The closest I can come is to say it was like having eyes everywhere, but even that doesn't quite capture it. I didn't have to turn or move to see in different directions. I was simultaneously aware of everything around me, above, below, behind, and front, and not just visually, but on every sensory level. I could perceive the energy and essence of everything. It made me realize how limited our physical senses are. We're only perceiving a tiny fraction of reality with our human bodies. That's fascinating. And you mentioned being able to see things far away, as if they were close. Can you give an example? Sure. While I was hovering above my body, I remember being able to see a couple walking their dog several blocks away as clearly as if they were right next to me. I could see the pattern on the dog's collar and the logo on the man's t-shirt. But it wasn't just visual. I could sense their emotions, the love between them, even the contentment of their dog. It was like distance didn't exist in that state. It sounds like an incredible expansion of consciousness. Now, you mentioned earlier that you felt no connection to your physical body when you saw it on the bench. Can you explain that further? It was the strangest feeling. I recognized that it was my body lying there, but I felt completely detached from it. It was like looking at an old coat I discarded. I felt no urge to return to it. In fact, when it came time to re-enter my body, there was a moment of resistance. The freedom and expansiveness I felt in that spiritual state was so incredible that part of me didn't want to be confined to a physical form again. That's really interesting. It brings up questions about the nature of consciousness and identity. Did this experience change how you view the relationship between body and soul? Absolutely. Before this, I had a pretty typical Western view of the body and soul, that our consciousness is somehow produced by our brains and that our identity is tied to our physical form. But this experience completely upended that perspective. Now, I see the body more like a vehicle or a temporary housing for our consciousness. Our true essence, what some might call the soul, exists independently of the physical form. It's far more expansive and connected to everything than we realize when we're identified with our bodies. That's a profound shift in perspective. Has this changed how you view death? Completely. I used to be terrified of death, like most people, but now I see it more as a transition rather than an ending. Don't get me wrong, I'm not in a rush to die. I value my life and the work I'm doing here, but I no longer fear what comes after. I know that when this body wears out, my consciousness will continue. And based on what I experienced, what comes next is so beautiful and filled with love that it's nothing to be afraid of. That must be very comforting. Now, I'm curious about the moment when you re-entered your body. You mentioned there was a resistance. Can you elaborate on that? Sure. As I approached my body lying on that bench, I felt a strong reluctance to go back in. The freedom and expansiveness I had experienced were so incredible that the idea of being confined to a physical form again felt almost claustrophobic. But at the same time, I had this deep knowing that it wasn't my time yet. I had more to do in this life. So there was this internal struggle between wanting to stay in that blissful state and knowing I needed to return. And then what happened? It was like a force took over. Suddenly, I felt myself being pulled back into my body. There was this loud pop sound, and then I was gasping for air, my eyes flying open. The contrast was jarring. One moment I was in this state of expansive bliss, and the next I was cold, disoriented, and feeling the heaviness of my physical body again. That sounds intense. How long did it take you to readjust to being back in your body? Physically, it took a few minutes to get my bearings. I remember sitting up slowly, feeling dizzy and nauseous. But mentally and emotionally, it took much longer. For weeks afterward, I felt like I was straddling two worlds. Part of me was still connected to that expansive state, while another part was trying to function in everyday life. It was challenging to focus on mundane tasks when I'd experienced something so profound. I kept replaying the experience in my mind, trying to hold on to every detail. Did you struggle with wanting to go back to that state? At times, yes. There were moments when the weight of everyday life felt overwhelming, and I longed for the peace and love I had felt during my NDE. But I also felt a new sense of purpose. I knew I had been given a second chance for a reason, and I was determined to make the most of it. You mentioned earlier that you didn't tell anyone about your experience for weeks. Why did you finally decide to share it? It was eating me up inside, keeping it to myself. I felt like I had discovered this incredible secret about the nature of reality and the afterlife, and I wanted to share it with others. But I was also afraid of how people would react. Finally, I decided to tell my parents. I thought if anyone would understand, it would be them, given their religious background. But their reaction was not what I expected. How did they respond? They were skeptical, to say the least. My father suggested that maybe I had hallucinated due to the alcohol in my system. My mother was worried that I was having some kind of mental health crisis. They even went so far as to set up a meeting with our church pastor. That must have been difficult. How did the meeting with the pastor go? It was one of the most disheartening experiences of my life. I went in hoping for understanding and validation. Instead, the pastor suggested that my experience might have been a demonic deception. He said that Satan often disguises himself as an angel of light to lead people astray. I was shocked. Here I was sharing this profound, life-changing encounter with Jesus, and I was being told it might be the work of the devil. It made me realize how threatening these experiences can be to certain religious viewpoints. How did you handle that rejection? It was tough. For a while, I felt very alone and misunderstood, but it also strengthened my resolve to trust my own experience. I knew in my heart that what I had experienced was real and positive. It had led me to make healthier choices and to want to help others. How could that be the work of Satan? That's when I started seeking out others who had had similar experiences. Finding that community was incredibly validating and healing. It sounds like it was a challenging period of integration. How long did it take before you felt you had fully processed the experience? In some ways, I'm still processing it 20 years later. An experience like that changes you fundamentally. It's not something you ever get over. It becomes a part of who you are. But I'd say it took about a year before I felt like I had found a balance between honoring that experience and living my everyday life. It was during that year that I made the decision to change my career path and go into social work. Speaking of your career, how do you approach talking about your NDE in your professional life? Do you share it with the youth you work with? I'm selective about when and how I share it. In my professional capacity, I'm careful not to impose my beliefs on others. But there are times when sharing parts of my story can be really impactful. For instance, when I'm working with a teen who feels hopeless or like their life has no purpose, I might share how my NDE showed me that every life is incredibly precious and important in ways we can't always see. Or if I'm working with someone struggling with addiction, I might talk about how my own brush with death led me to change my relationship with alcohol. That makes sense. It sounds like you use your experience as a tool to help others without forcing your interpretation on them. Exactly. My goal is never to convince anyone to believe what I believe. It's to offer hope and a different perspective. If sharing my experience can help someone see their life in a new light or consider possibilities they hadn't before, then it's worth it. Now, I'd like to go back to something you mentioned earlier. You said that during your NDE, you could perceive the energy and essence of everything around you. Can you elaborate on that? It's hard to put into words, but I'll try. In that state, it was like I could see the life force in everything, not just in living beings, but in what we typically think of as inanimate objects too. Everything seemed interconnected, pulsing with the same underlying energy. I could sense the thoughts and emotions of people around me, not as words, but as direct knowing. And I could perceive the history and potential futures of objects and places. It was like seeing everything in its totality, past, present, and future all at once. That's mind-boggling to imagine. Did this perception give you any insights into the nature of reality? Many. One of the biggest was the realization that everything is far more interconnected than we realize. In our normal state, we perceive ourselves as separate individuals, but from that higher perspective, I could see that we're all part of one great tapestry of consciousness. I also gained a deep understanding of cause and effect. I could see how every action, every thought, creates ripples that affect everything else. It gave me a new appreciation for the importance of our choices and the power of our intentions. That's profound. Now, you mentioned earlier that Jesus showed you two potential futures. Do you feel like you fulfilled the positive future you were shown? In many ways, yes. I'm doing the work I saw myself doing in that vision, helping at-risk youth and making a positive impact in my community. But I also believe that vision was more symbolic than literal. It wasn't a fixed future, but a representation of the potential I had within me. I think the point wasn't to fulfill that exact scenario, but to show me that I had the power to change my life's direction and to make a positive difference in the world. In that sense, I feel like I'm living out that potential every day, even if the details don't match exactly. That's a beautiful way to look at it. Now, as we start to wrap up, I'm curious, how has your NDE affected your view of life's purpose? It's given me a much broader perspective on why we're here. I believe we're all here to learn, to grow, and to help each other. Every interaction, every challenge, every joy is an opportunity for growth and for spreading love. I no longer see success in terms of material achievements or social status. True success, to me, is about how much love and kindness you can bring into the world, how much you can help others, and how much you can evolve spiritually. That's a powerful shift in perspective. One last question. If you could sum up the most important lesson from your NDE, what would it be? I'd say that love is the most powerful force in the universe. Not romantic love or familial love, but a universal, unconditional love that encompasses everything. That's what I felt in the presence of Jesus and in that realm of light. If we could bring even a fraction of that love into our daily lives, in how we treat ourselves, others, and the world around us, we could transform everything. That's what I strive for every day, and what I try to teach the young people I work with. Love really does have the power to heal and to change lives. Thank you so much for sharing your incredible story with us. Your experience and the insights you've gained from it are truly inspiring. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share it. If my story can bring hope or comfort to even one person, then reliving it is always worth it.